Now this is one of the best Ice Shard builds for the Sorcerer in Season 1. You can easily do tier 100 Nightmare dungeons, quickly level up and destroy bosses. So let's check this out. Okay, so first I'm going to show you clearing this dungeon. And as you can see, I'm doing a tier 100 Nightmare dungeon. And with this build, you will be able to do trillions of damage and easily destroy bosses. This build is also great at leveling and speed farming dungeons. So starting with the Malignant Hearts. Now the season should just be called the Season of the Barber, because the Barber Wrathful Malignant Heart is just the best Malignant Heart in the game. You can easily clear groups of enemies and destroy bosses with the Barber Wrathful Malignant Heart. Now the next two Malignant Hearts you're looking for, you will need an orange color socket accessory. The reason why is that so you can use the Taurash's Malignant Heart and the Tempting Fate Malignant Heart. These two Malignant Hearts will greatly increase your overall damage. Now if you're having trouble finding a good orange socket accessory, and can only find a blue or a red color socket accessory, then you can use the Revenge Heart Malignant Heart or the blue color socket accessory for defense and survivability. Or you can use the Determination Malignant Heart or the red socket color accessory for the increased mana regeneration. But ideally you want to find accessories with the orange color socket for the Taurash's Malignant Heart and the Tempting Fate Malignant Heart for the insane increase in damage. Okay, so now let's check out the skills. Now, of course, the main skill is Ice Shards, and this will be our main damage dealing skill. The next skill I'm using is Frost Nova, and this will freeze and apply vulnerable to enemies. The next two skills will be barrier skills, so Flame Shield and Ice Armor for defense and survivability. The next skill I have is Teleport, and this is just one of the best movement skills in the game. And the last skill I have is the ultimate skill, Deep Freeze. This is just basically a get out of jail for free skill. While Deep Freeze is active, you'll become immune to everything, chill and freeze enemies around you, and all your cooldowns will reset. And this ultimate skill saved me a ton of times when my other skills were on cooldown. Okay, so next let's check out the enchantments. Now the first enchantment I'm using is the Firebolt enchantment. This will basically apply burning damage to all your skills. And because all our skills now apply burning damage, we can now benefit from the skill Devouring Blaze, which will greatly increase our critical strike damage against burning enemies. Now for the second enchantment, I do switch around depending if I'm fighting a boss or a group of enemies. Now when fighting a group of enemies, it's better to use the Ice Shards enchantment, because whenever you freeze enemies, the Ice Shards will automatically fire at them and destroy them. So the Ice Shards enchantment makes it very easy to destroy huge groups of enemies. Now when I'm fighting bosses, I will quickly switch out the Ice Shards enchantment and switch it up to the Frostbolt enchantment. The reason why is that Ice Shards does not originally apply chill, so the Frostbolt enchantment will apply chill to your Ice Shards skill, so you can quickly stagger bosses and then easily destroy them. Okay, so next let's check out the skill tree. So starting with the basic skills, I put 1 point into Firebolt, and this is for the Firebolt enchantment slot, so all my skills can apply burning damage to enemies. And I put 1 point into Frostbolt for the Frostbolt enchantment when fighting bosses. Now majority of the time I will use the Ice Shards enchantment for my second enchantment to easily clear huge groups of enemies. But when I fight bosses, I'll switch the Ice Shards enchantment to Frostbolt, so my Ice Shards can apply chill, and this will easily stagger the bosses. But of course, once the boss is defeated, don't forget to switch back the Frostbolt enchantment to the Ice Shards enchantment so you can easily clear huge groups of enemies. Okay, so next for the core skills, I put 5 points into Ice Shards, a point into Enhanced Ice Shards, and a point into Destructive Ice Shards. And of course, this is our main damage dealing skill. And next I put 1 point into Devastation and 3 points into Elemental Dominance, and this will increase our core skills damage. Now for the defensive skills, I put 1 point into Flame Shield, a point into Enhanced Flame Shield, and a point into Shimmering Flame Shield. And this is just one of the best barriers in the game. You become completely immune to damage. Next I put 1 point into Teleport, a point into Enhanced Teleport, and a point into Shimmering Teleport. And this is just one of the best movement skills in the game. Next I put 1 point into Ice Armor, a point into Enhanced Ice Armor, and a point into Shimmering Ice Armor. And this skill will give us more defense and survivability. Next I put 1 point into Frost Nova, a point into Enhanced Frost Nova, and a point into Mystical Frost Nova. And this skill will freeze and apply vulnerable to enemies. Next I put 3 points into Glass Cannon, and this is a huge damage increase. And I put 1 point into Elemental Attunement, and this skill gives us a chance to reset one of our defensive skills. Now next for the Conjuration skills, I put 1 point into Align the Elements and 1 point into Protection, and these skills are for defense and survivability. Next I put 3 points into Precision Magic. Now this build does require some lucky hit chance, so this skill is important for this build. Next for the Mastery skills, I put 1 point into Inner Flames and 3 points into Devouring Blaze, and this will greatly increase our critical strike damage against burning enemies. Next I put 1 point into Icy Veil and 3 points into Snap Freeze, and this skill skill is important because it allows your frost skills to have a chance to instantly freeze enemies. So be aware that ice shards alone does not chill or freeze enemies. So having snap freeze will give a chance for your ice shards to instantly freeze enemies, allowing you to easily kite them. And next for the ultimate skills, I put 1 point into defreeze, a point into prime defreeze, and a point into supreme defreeze. And this is my get out of jail free skill. You basically become completely immune. You will chill and freeze enemies around you, and you will reset all your cooldowns. Next, I put 3 points into permafrost, 3 points into hoarfrost, and 3 points into icy touch. And this will increase the damage of all our frost skills. And next, I put 3 points into frigid breeze. And this skill is important to regenerate mana. And last but not least, for the key passive, I put 1 point into avalanche. And with this skill, your ice shards will have a chance to consume no mana and deal increased damage. Okay, so next let's check out the gear. And I do want to mention that every piece of gear and stats are important for this build in order to easily clear tier 100 nightmare dungeons. But I'm just going to highlight the most important stats and the legendary affix you're looking for. But I'll have a D4 build planner in the description below with the best stats and legendary aspects for this build. So starting with the helmet, you're looking for cooldown reduction and total armor. And the legendary aspect I have is that Frost Nova gains an additional charge, but the cooldown per charge is increased by 30%. Now this legendary aspect is very important. Having an additional charge of Frost Nova is really good for offense and defense when fighting huge groups of enemies. Next for the chest piece, you're looking for damage reduction stats. And the legendary aspect I have is that you take 25% less damage from crowd control or vulnerable enemies. Now once you're in the highest tier nightmare dungeons, a lot of enemies will just be able to one-shot you if you don't have a lot of damage reduction stats. But just be aware that when it comes to leveling, it's better to use the Raiment of the Infinite. The reason why is that when you're leveling, ideally you don't want to do nightmare dungeons where the enemies are more than 10 levels higher than yourself, because with the most recent update you will not gain additional XP if the mobs are over 10 levels than you, and this was added to prevent other players from boosting. So because of that, it's better to equip the Raiment of the Infinite unique chest piece, because this will pull and stun enemies around you, and with this you can easily clear the dungeons very quickly. But once you want to do the highest tier nightmare dungeons, it will be better to switch to a chest piece with damage reduction stats, so you won't get one-shotted by enemies. But don't get me wrong, there's still some enemies that still can one-shot you, but those enemies will usually be slow and easy to dodge. Next for the gloves, you're looking for critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, attack speed, and ranks to ice shards. And the legendary aspect I have is that your ice shards pierce 4 times, dealing 20% less damage per subsequent enemy hit. And this legendary aspect is important, so your ice shards can pierce and hit multiple enemies. Next for the pants, you're looking for damage reduction stats. And the legendary aspect I have is that you gain 0.5% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 30%. And this legendary aspect is just one of the best defensive legendary aspects in the game. Now for the boots, you're looking for movement speed, ranks to teleport, and ranks to Frost Nova. And the legendary aspect I have is that Flame Shield lets you move unhindered through enemies. Enemies you move through while Flame Shield is active are immobilized for 3 seconds. This legendary aspect is good for moving through huge packs of enemies, and against bosses it'll greatly stagger the bosses. Next for the weapon, you're looking for a wand, and the reason why is that its base stat has lucky hit chance, and the other stat you're looking for is vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, core skill damage, and all stats. And the legendary aspect I have is that you deal 30% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier. Now the reason you want all stats is because on the Paragon board you will be missing some stats to get the bonus stats from the rare Paragon nodes, so having all stats on your weapon or your helmet will help get the bonus stats from the rare Paragon nodes. Okay, so next for the amulet, you're looking for cooldown reduction, movement speed, and ranks to Devouring Blaze. And the legendary aspect I have is that you deal 53% more damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies. And this legendary aspect greatly increases our damage to frozen enemies. Next for the rings, now there are some stats you can switch around, but ideally you're looking for vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, critical strike chance, resource regeneration, or on my second ring I have lucky hit chance. So these are ideally the 5 stats you're looking to get on your rings. And the first ring's legendary aspect I have is that critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by 25%, and this legendary aspect will greatly increase our attack speed. And for the second ring's legendary aspect I have the avalanche key passive now applies 1 additional cast. This legendary aspect is important because the avalanche key passive is really strong. And last but not least, for the offhand, you're looking for cooldown reduction, critical strike chance, mana cost reduction, and lucky hit chance. And the legendary aspect I have is that you deal 25% increased damage while you have a barrier barrier active. And with this build, you will ideally have a barrier active almost all the time. Okay, so that's pretty much the best stats and legendary aspects you're looking to get on your gear. But if you're having mana issues in the early levels, then I recommend to switch out this legendary aspect that increases your attack speed from your ring to a legendary aspect that gives you mana, like the Prodigy's aspect that restores mana when you use a cooldown, or the aspect of concentration that increases your mana regeneration. And I did list the best stats and legendary aspects in a D4 build planner in the description below. Okay, so next let's check out the gems and Malignant Hearts. So for the armor, you're looking for ruby gems for the increased maximum life. For the weapon, you're looking for emerald gems for the increased critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. And for the Malignant Hearts, first you want to use the best Malignant Heart, which is the Barber Wrathful Malignant Heart. And the Barber Wrathful Malignant Heart is just overpowered and will destroy packs of enemies and bosses. Now for the next two Malignant Hearts, you're looking for orange color socket accessories. So you can socket Vicious Malignant Hearts. Now Vicious Malignant Hearts will greatly increase your damage. So the first Vicious Malignant Heart I have equipped is the Talrash's Malignant Heart, and this will greatly increase our skill's damage. And the second Vicious Malignant Heart I have is Tempting Fate, and this will greatly increase my critical strike damage. Now I do have other rings with similar stats, but with a different color socket for the Malignant Hearts. But you do want to find orange color socket accessories to socket Vicious Malignant Hearts to greatly increase your damage. Okay, so next let's check out the Paragon Board. And I do want to mention that this Paragon Board is fully optimized for the Ice Shards build at level 100. Now I'm just going to quickly go over the Paragon Board, but I'll have a D4 build planner in the description below with the full Paragon Board layout. So starting with the starter board, I went with the Destruction Glyph, and this glyph will greatly increase our critical strike damage. Then I headed up this way, and for the second Paragon Board I took Burning Instinct. The glyph I chose was Exploit, and this will greatly increase our vulnerable damage. And this Paragon Board is really good because it will increase our damage to burning enemies. Then I headed this way, and for the next Paragon Board I took Enchantment Master, and the glyph I took is Elementalist, and this will increase our Paragon node's non-physical damage, and the additional bonus is that dealing fire, cold, or lightning damage to an enemy increases all damage you deal to them by 5% for 10 seconds, stacking once per element, and this glyph will greatly increase our damage. And then I headed down this way, and for the next Paragon Board I took Frigid Fate, and the glyph I took is Tactician, and this will increase the bonuses to all rare nodes within range, and the additional bonus is that you deal 10% increased damage for 4 seconds after casting a defensive skill. Now the bonus we're getting from the rare nodes is the vulnerable damage, so this glyph will help us increase vulnerable damage. And this Paragon Board is really good because it has rare nodes that increase your vulnerable damage. Then I headed this way, and the next Paragon Board I took is Icefall, and the glyph I'm using is Flame Feeder, and this will greatly increase our damage to burning enemies. Then I headed up this way, and for the last Paragon Board I took Searing Heat, and the glyph I'm using is Control, and this will greatly increase our damage to crowd controlled enemies. And the reason why this Paragon Board is good is because it will have magic and rare nodes that will increase our critical strike damage. Okay, so this is pretty much the most optimized Paragon Board at level 100 for Ice Shard builds. Now just be aware, you do want to look at the stats on the side and make sure you get the bonuses for the rare nodes. And the reason I have all stats on my wand is because I needed more willpower to reach the bonus on this rare node. Okay, so that's pretty much the full Paragon Board layout. And like I mentioned before, I will have a D4 build planner in the description below with the full Paragon Board layout. Okay, so thanks for checking out one of the best Ice Shard builds for the Sorcerer in Season 1. Now just be aware that this build is meant for clearing the highest level Nightmare dungeons, or speed farming / leveling. This build is not optimized for beating Uber Lilith because this build has a lot of crowd control and crowd control damage, which is not needed when fighting Uber Lilith. So you do want to adjust some skill points and Paragon points when fighting Uber Lilith to easily beat her. And more Diablo 4 videos to come, so stay tuned. And of course,